There's a significant shift happening in the ongoing battle between ISWAP and Boko Haram, and it's one that's been building for a while now. As many of you know, Boko Haram has been a huge threat in the northeastern region of Nigeria for over a decade, but things are changing. ISWAP, which broke away from Boko Haram a few years ago, has been gaining momentum and is now making big moves against the various Boko Haram factions that have been causing devastation in the region. ISWAP is currently taking the upper hand in this war, and let me tell you, the implications of this could change the landscape of the fight against terror in the country. Just recently, ISWAP has made significant strides by defeating the Gazuwa faction of Boko Haram. This is no small victory. Gazuwa's faction has been one of the more dangerous ones, and for ISWAP to defeat them in battle shows just how far they've come in terms of strength and organization. But as we know, the fight isn't over. ISWAP's attention is now focused on another faction, the Ngulde faction, which has been heavily entrenched in the Sambisa forest and the Mandara mountains. These areas have been the strongholds for Boko Haram for years, and the fact that ISWAP is now targeting them with such ferocity shows that they are intent on taking over and completely dismantling the remnants of Boko Haram. But here's where things get even more interesting. ISWAP isn't stopping there. They are planning to expand their offensive, and they've set their sights on the Bakura faction of Boko Haram, which has been operating around the Lake Chad area. Now, if ISWAP succeeds in taking out these three major Boko Haram factions, Gazuwas, Nguldes, and Bakuras, we could be looking at a completely different situation in Nigeria. That would leave just one faction remaining, the Sadiku faction, which is based in Niger State. This faction isn't nearly as active as the others, and many experts believe that the Sadiku faction is weaker, though still a potential threat. So, what does this mean for Nigeria? Well, the big question is whether the defeat of these factions will lead to a decrease in terrorism in the country. On one hand, the defeat of Boko Haram's major factions could mean fewer attacks, less instability, and a reduction in the human suffering that has come with their insurgency. However, ISWAP is no friend to the people either. They're just as ruthless, and in fact, the methods are often more brutal. They've been responsible for numerous attacks and have terrorized both Nigeria and neighboring countries like Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. While it may seem like one evil is being replaced by another, it's important to note that ISWAP could be an even bigger challenge than Boko Haram was in some ways. They are more organized, have more resources, and are more aligned with the global Islamic State network, making them a more significant global threat. The human toll of this war is something that can't be ignored either. Thousands of families have been displaced and entire communities have been torn apart by these ongoing conflicts. Refugee camps in the region are overcrowded, and many people are living in constant fear of attacks. The Nigerian military has been working tirelessly to contain the situation, but the challenges they face are immense. The insurgency is like a shadow that looms over the country, and even though progress is being made in some areas, the fight is far from over. Now let's talk about the regional impact of all this. The conflict isn't just contained to Nigeria. Countries like Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, which share borders with Nigeria, have also been heavily affected by Boko Haram and ISWAP. These groups have often crossed borders, carrying out raids, kidnapping, and attacks on civilians and military forces alike. The defeat of Boko Haram factions in Nigeria could bring some stability to these neighboring countries, but the rise of ISWAP could mean that the region remains in a constant state of insecurity. These countries will need to remain vigilant as the fight against terrorism is far from over. One thing we need to consider as we watch this story unfold is the resilience of the Nigerian military. Despite being stretched thin, they continue to face off against groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP, sometimes with limited resources. The bravery of the Nigerian soldiers is commendable, and it's clear that they are giving their all to keep the country safe. However, the reality is that the military alone can't solve this problem. It will require cooperation on a larger scale, with neighboring countries working together to contain and ultimately defeat these groups. The regional approach will be key in the fight against terrorism in the Sahel and West Africa. We also have to ask ourselves, what happens next? The world is watching Nigeria, and ISWAP's success could lead to even more violent attacks in the future. If ISWAP defeats the other Boko Haram factions, they will be able to control more territory and resources, making them an even more powerful group in the region. This could lead to increased violence, especially as they turn their attention to other regions like the north-central and southwestern parts of Nigeria. So, while the defeat of Boko Haram's major factions could seem like a step toward peace, it could just be the beginning of another phase of this ongoing conflict. But here's the catch. While ISWAP might be victorious for now, there's still hope. Hope for the future. We've seen moments of progress, and if the Nigerian government and military can maintain the pressure, there's a chance for stabilization. But it will take time. It will take cooperation. And it will take a united front from the Nigerian people and the international community. The battle isn't over, but it could be nearing a turning point. What's clear is that the situation is dynamic, and we'll have to keep our eyes on the developments over the coming months. As we watch this conflict unfold, it's also important to recognize the broader implications. The global community is keeping an eye on West Africa, especially Nigeria, because what happens here doesn't just affect the region, it impacts the entire continent. The success of ISWAP could inspire similar groups across Africa to adopt similar tactics, making the battle against terrorism even harder. And while Nigeria has its own challenges, global cooperation will play a critical role in containing the violence and preventing it from spilling into other countries. The humanitarian side of this conflict is something we can't ignore either. Tens of thousands of people have been displaced due to the ongoing attacks, with many seeking refuge in neighboring countries. These are families who've lost everything: homes, loved ones, and their sense of security. The United Nations and other aid organizations are doing what they can. But the scale of this crisis is massive. These refugees are living in camps, facing shortages of food, medicine, and basic necessities. If you ask anyone on the ground, they'll tell you that these displaced people are the ones who bear the brunt of the violence. The Nigerian military has been heavily involved in trying to restore peace, but even with their efforts, the threat is ever present. Boko Haram and ISWAP have shown they can adapt and regroup, which makes them harder to defeat. The fear is that as one faction is taken down, others may rise, ready to take control. The government's commitment to fighting this insurgency is vital, but there's a growing sense that this problem can't be solved through military force alone. Long-term peace will require addressing the root causes of the violence: economic hardship, poor governance, and lack of education. People turn to extremism when they feel excluded and without opportunities. When you think about it, ISWAP's rise is also a reflection of the broader issues affecting the region. For years now, communities have felt neglected by the government, and some have turned to these groups for protection or for a sense of belonging. ISWAP has been smart about exploiting these vulnerabilities, offering promises of stability and power in exchange for allegiance. But as we know, promises from extremist groups often come at a terrible cost. Now, here's something that should keep us all on alert. If ISWAP successfully consolidates its power in Nigeria, we could see an increase in attacks in areas outside of the Northeast. They have already proven they can strike across borders, and their reach is growing. The Lake Chad region is already a hotbed for ISWAP activity, and if they gain control of more territory, they could start to affect the stability of countries like Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, further exacerbating an already dire situation. Let's take a moment to think about the world's response to these developments. While there's been some support from international partners, including counter-terrorism and military aid, the global community needs to step up. Terrorism in Nigeria isn't just Nigeria's problem, it's a global one. The rise of ISWAP could have ripple effects far beyond Africa's borders, which is why international cooperation is crucial. The fight against terrorism is a shared responsibility, and right now Nigeria needs all the support it can get. However, despite all the uncertainty, there's a glimmer of hope. With all the chaos and violence, there are also stories of incredible bravery and resilience. Local communities are coming together to rebuild after each attack. Even in the face of this ongoing war, ordinary people are showing extraordinary courage. Local militias, community leaders, and even young people are fighting back in their own ways, determined to protect their homes and their families. The Nigerian government has made strides in strengthening its defense and intelligence services, but it's going to take more than military power to solve this. The future lies in a comprehensive strategy, one that focuses not just on military victories, but on rebuilding trust, creating economic opportunities, and addressing the social issues that have allowed these extremist groups to flourish in the first place. There needs to be a focus on improving education, creating jobs, and offering better opportunities for young people, especially those living in conflict zones. Only then will we be able to break the cycle of extremism. So, while we may be seeing ISWAP's victory over Boko Haram as a significant development, we have to remember that the real battle is far from over. The fight is against extremism in all its forms. And that's a fight that requires cooperation, not just between countries, but between communities and governments. The road to peace in Nigeria may be long and hard, but with continued effort and international support, it's not impossible. And you know what? It's not just about ISWAP-Boko Haram or the Nigerian government. It's about the future of the people in the region, those who have lived through so much violence, loss, and displacement. They deserve peace, stability, and hope for a better future. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to think about how we, as individuals, can help. We may not be able to change the course of the conflict, but we can stay informed, spread awareness, and support organizations that are providing relief to those affected by the violence. Share the story, talk about it, and help keep the conversation going. So, what do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for Boko Haram, or just the start of a new chapter of terror with ISWAP taking control? Could Nigeria finally see the peace it so desperately needs? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And while you're at it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to stay updated with the latest news on this and other important stories. As always, thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next video.